This is Revelation lesson 16, covering Revelation chapter 18. But first, in the previous lesson, I explained how Mystery Babylon was a religious system that controlled every kingdom since the first Gentile kingdom was formed under Nimrod. That system is called Mystery Babylon, religious system. And it's closely connected to the city, the literal city of Babylon, but they're not one and the same. One is a religious system again, the other a literal last days city named Babylon. And there are similarities and differences between those two entities. In this lesson we will cover Revelation chapter 18 first, and then we'll go over the similarities and differences between the religious system and the literal city of Babylon, both called Babylon. Revelation 18, 1 and following. After these things that happened in chapter 17, Mystery Babylon, I, John, saw another angel coming down out of heaven, one having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great has fallen. It has fallen, and it has become a dwelling place for demons and a prison for every foul demonic spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird, literal birds. Remember how the birds of prey and the wild animals will consume all those bodies at the Battle of Armageddon. So evidently they're going to start accumulating in the city of Babylon in the last days, getting ready for that great last battle, Armageddon. Because all of the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, literal city of Babylon, and all the kings of the earth have committed spiritual and literal fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of the city of Babylon's luxury. Notice this in the following. And I heard another voice coming out of heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest the plagues that come on her will come on you too. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render unto her the same as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. Babylon, this is the literal city of Babylon. In that cup that she has mixed double to her. And in the measure that she has glorified herself and lived luxuriously, with that same measure give her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as queen, and am no widow, and I will not see sorrow. Therefore her plagues will come in one day. This is the literal city of Babylon in the last days. Death, mourning, and famine. And she, literal Babylon, will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. God will destroy Babylon with fire in the last days. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication with her, and have lived luxuriously with her, Babylon, will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning by the judgment of God. They'll be standing at a distance for fear of her torment, fearing it might get on them too, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her judgment, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. Now notice this. The merchandise, a long list of these things, literal merchandise stuff, things that people use and need coming through Babylon. The merchandise of gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object made of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots. These are literal, not figurative, not symbols. And the bodies and souls of men. The fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you, Babylon, and all of the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you will find them no more. The merchants of all these things who became rich by her will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, that great city which was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour such great riches have come to nothing. Every shipmaster, all those who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea, stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What is like this great city? And they threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing, and saying again, Alas, alas, that great city, in which all who had ships on the oceans became rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets in the last days. Even though much of the church has said the apostles and prophets passed away, they were in the first century, but it will be no more. But this says, in the last days there will be holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her, Babylon. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and then threw the stone into the sea, saying, With violence the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, destroyed, and it will not be found anymore. Now this is an end-time event, and it's talking about Babylon, not a code word. This is the literal city of Babylon, and we find in 1 Peter 5:13 that there was a church. There were believers in Babylon. That city is mentioned. The name Babylon is mentioned. That again, that is in 1 Peter 5:13. So the total destruction of the literal city of Babylon has not yet occurred. It will in the end times. Then John goes on, the sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters will not be heard in you, Babylon, anymore. No craftsman of any craft will be found in you, Babylon city, anymore. The sound of a millstone will not be heard in you anymore. The light of a lamp will not shine in you anymore, nor will the voice of the bride and bridegroom be heard in you anymore. All of your merchants were the great men of the earth, and by your sorcery, witchcraft, all the nations were deceived. And in her was found the blood of God's prophets and saints, and of all who were slain on the earth for their faith. So the mystery Babylon religious system and the city of Babylon, both connected to a persecution of God's people. This is how it started back in Babylon, that the Bible talks about back in early days, thousands of years ago. Religion started in Babylon, it'll end in Babylon. Now, for some comparisons and contrasts of these two Babylons. Remember, chapter 17 talks about Mystery Babylon, a religious system. Chapter 18 talks about a literal city. Now, this is a top of the list, the highlights of these comparisons and contrasts of the two Babylons. First, the similarities between the two Babylons. Both are called a city and they're called Babylon. Both commit fornication. Both have killed prophets, and both will be destroyed. Now, these are the highlights. There are other similarities as well, but that'll show you that they were connected. Now the differences, most of them, the highlights. There are more, but here is a list of the primary differences between the two Babylons. One of them is called a woman. The other is not. Mystery Babylon was seen as a woman. That's not mentioned concerning the city of Babylon. The woman was called a mystery, which has to do with religion. The literal city of Babylon was not. None of that was mentioned about the literal city. The woman was seen riding on a beast. The city of Babylon was not pictured that way. One was called the mother of harlots and abominations, the literal religious system. The other is not. And that's not said about literal Babylon city. John marveled at one, not at the other. When he saw that woman sitting on that beast, he marveled. And the angel questioned why he marveled at her. That's not said about the city when John saw the revelation about the city. Mystery Babylon was unknown to John, so the angel had to explain it. But he knew about literal Babylon, so that needed no explaining. The woman had made herself rich. The literal city of Babylon made men rich. No merchandise is really mentioned in chapter 17. The gold, silver, and precious stones and all that was what the woman was wearing. It's not something that she provided for other people. She made herself rich. But the city made men rich. And there's no merchandise mentioned about the religion connected with the religious system, but a long list of all kinds of stuff, things, goods, products, were listed. Merchandise were listed in chapter 18 under the city of Babylon, and what John saw about that. Men destroy the religious system. This is one of the big differences. God destroys the literal city of Babylon. Remember the 10 kings? They hated the prostitute, and they killed her. But God judged literal city of Babylon. And men rejoiced at the woman's destruction. They rejoiced over religious system destruction, but they lamented over and over and over. In chapter 18, it says, "Alas, alas." And these guys were weeping and wailing and lamenting over the destruction of the literal city of Babylon. Now I need to say this, give you something to think about. There's a modern inclusion movement. They want to include everything and all get along together except anything from God. They reject God's stuff, but all the religions of the world, all the political systems, this is all get together. And so it's very possible that through this modern inclusion movement, many will bring together various non-Christian religions to form a last days religion that will help the Antichrist come to power. But then after he comes to power and does not need the religious system anymore, he will have the 10 kings to destroy that system. Now, I've mentioned more than once that the religious system has been over and controlled all the Gentile kingdoms, all 7 of them, from the first, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, the last days form of that old Roman Empire, and the beast that rules over that under the Antichrist, which actually it says is the 8th kingdom, but will be of the 7, one of the 7, under the old Grecian Empire, angelic being that ruled over it, and that kingdom was destroyed. And then he will come back out of the abyss and be over this last days kingdom under Satan and over Antichrist. Well, I'm going to go over several scriptures. I don't want to leave you hanging just to take my word for it that religion has controlled all these kingdoms throughout history. The next lesson, I'm going over the highlights of lots of scriptures to show you that the Bible tells you that. It tells you that, so I'm sure you do not want to miss the next lesson on where is God.